a podcast about product management, user experience design, technology, and more. This is Product by Design. All right, welcome back to another episode of Product by Design. I am Kyle Evans, and this week we have another great guest with us, Brad Hawkins. Welcome, Brad.
Thanks, Kyle. Excited to be here. Very excited.
Yeah, excited to chat with you today. So let me do a brief introduction for you, Brad, and then you can tell us a little bit more about yourself. But Brad is the Chief Solutions Officer at ServicePower, which is a leading field service management software for companies like Costco, LG, Whirlpool, and more. And Brad has more than 25 years of experience developing field service solutions and elevating the processes for customer experiences. So I'm excited to talk to you because I think there's a lot to unpack there. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and some of your experience?
Sure. I will start by telling you I'm a long timer at ServicePower. I've been with the company. I'm in my 28th year. Which I know a lot of people hear that and go, my God, how is it that you could stay at one company long? One, I love the mission we have at ServicePower. I love the work I've done at ServicePower. I've done many roles in my time here. I have run development. I've run product. I've run our professional services organization. So I have a bit of a varied background, which from a product standpoint, I love that because I've learned in running product, you're kind of like a miniature or a junior CEO. You work with every section of the business, every aspect of the business. So I mean, like I said, I've been here forever. If I go all the way back before that, I started my career as a self-taught programmer, worked at a company that we did data management and worked my way into, then came to ServicePower, which I know we'll get a little more into, what we do and how our stuff, fits in the world today. But, just somebody who's, again, I've been here forever, but had a varied background within ServicePower. I like to think I've been in this field service industry for a long time. So, and I'm passionate about talking to it. You're going to learn that in this podcast. Geek for field service. So I'll stop there. And that's a bit of background on me.
Well, I'm excited to talk a little bit more about it. But before we dive into that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you like to do outside of the office?
What do I like to do outside of the office? So, living out, I do live out in Arizona, so I've got great weather. I've got a boat. I love spending time with the family on the boat. I love golfing, which I live in the golf capital of the world. Boy, like to travel when we can, but, have two daughters at home that can make that challenging at times. But, for my home life, it's all about family and what we can do together. But, again, spending some time out at the lake and, we're pretty basic here in this house. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're definitely right now we're recording in the winter time. So, depending on when you're listening to this right now in Arizona is a really, really nice time to be there.
Today, it's got to be about 70 degrees today, sunny, feels great outside. Now, again, for those understanding when it's recording, when it is August, you're talking 110, 100. I have this thing where if it hits 100, I can't golf. I just can't do it because you get about 5 or 6 holes in, and even though you're karting around, it still saps you. So so I try to get in as much golf as I can now. Yeah, but it is a great place to live.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I love Arizona. I think it's just an absolutely beautiful place and a great state.
Yep.
All right. I want to hear a little bit more about your journey and your current role. So, you've been with ServicePower for a long time, 28 years that you mentioned. So tell us a little bit more about how you got into the things that you're doing. You said you started out as a self-taught programmer and then, went through a number of roles in your current company. As you worked through, a variety of different things. Tell us about that journey, how you went from one thing to another, especially within the same organization. And what did that look like? And then how did it lead up to your current role as Chief Solutions Officer?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. But what I would tell you is somebody, again, who I had kind of taught myself how to program and had worked my way into even before ServicePower where, had jobs where we were doing some programming as it related to ICR and OCR of capturing data through intelligent character recognition. One of the things I learned early on that I think helped me move into additional roles was, as a programmer, it's, you can get by knowing how to write code and, producing good code, but understanding the purpose, what's the value? Like asking yourself, what's the value in what I'm doing, and applying it to why it matters to the business. When you start to think in those terms, that's when you're kind of taking it out of, I'm not just a coder anymore. I want to understand why what I'm doing matters. The way that kind of worked at ServicePower, and we're going way back. So when you go back 20 years, like, it was a lot different back then. But I took that experience that I had in what I did from my previous job. Again, it was data management. So we had to have ways to capture data. And our largest client was FedEx at the time. And so we built this system where I could scan a FedEx air bill, read as much of it as I could. Whatever I couldn't read, I could bring up on a screen to show somebody, this is the piece I couldn't read, fill in the difference, right? Well, when I ended up getting a job with ServicePower, we were collecting warranty claims. That's how we kind of got in with OEMs and appliance manufacturers and consumer electronics. We were in the warranty side of that, and everybody would be sending in these paper claims. That led me to, well, maybe we can scan these and take all this information off. What can I capture, read intelligently? I really understood the mission of the business at the time was, it's not just about capturing the data anymore. Now it's, how do I intelligently use that data to enhance a process? So the process, and stop me anytime if you have a question along the way. What we had at the time, and this was sort of where the claims process evolved, was you have people out doing repairs in people's homes. And again, this was years ago. They would go in and do a repair, and they would want to get paid because it was under warranty. So now they're asking the OEM to get paid. They would send a piece of paper to them. So imagine emailing, here's my claim, and I need to get paid. That OEM would look at that piece of paper and go, well, for me to pay you, I require these different things. And you didn't do 3 of them. So I'm going to write you a little note that says, I need a valid serial number from you, or I need you to look at this part, and I mail it back to you. And then they make a change and they mail it back. And so you're talking, it was taking probably 60 to 90 days to pay out on a warranty claim. And so that's where a system was then built that says, how can I have somebody electronically submit these things? And when it does electronically submit, how do I give them real-time feedback that says, oh, you missed these 1, 2, 3 things. Here's the errors that you haven't given us. And they can fix them on the spot. And that turned payment terms to where we have clients today who they typically can pay next day. We have some who still say, well, I want to gather a week's worth of claims and pay them. I'll pay them at the end of the week, but whatever. But I mean, imagine small businesses that are going into your homes to repair things and how much cash flow matters to them. And to have 90 days of receivables tied up in, I'm trying to get paid by these guys, but I'm waiting to hear a response. We turn that into, I can now do it in real time. I can have a response to you. And that's just one component of what we do. But that's kind of going back. That's where my background started, was working on that particular system. And again, in understanding the value of what we're creating, it got me to a point where I could be talking to the execs at the time to say, what can we do to make this process faster? How can we do this? Can we try this? Can we try this? And that kind of, I think, helped lead me into a product background, because I think the number one thing you need to be considering in product is, what's the value I can create? So yeah, I'll stop there. So
you've hit on so many really, really great points. When I think about product development in general, and really everybody involved in it, the key thing for me is really understanding the value that you're creating, kind of like you mentioned, and having everybody aligned to that value, and not necessarily just handing like, here's a feature to build, or here's the thing, but here's the experience that we're creating and the value that we're creating. How can we do that? And ultimately, that being the best way to get, the best experience and the best products and the best things created, with everybody understanding that, here's what we're trying to do, not necessarily just here's the thing that we're creating. It's, here's the goal that we're trying to achieve. I absolutely love that. How have you seen that in your experience be kind of perpetuated through the culture? Is that something that has been really part of the culture of the company, or is that something that you kind of took early on and have instituted it as part of your role as you grew into it? Like how has that both shaped what you have done and shaped what the company has become?
Yeah. So I would tell you now, as the guy who's on, in my 28 years, I ran product, and then I moved over to professional services and ran our consulting division. And it was last year, January, that I came back to running product again. From a value standpoint and a cultural standpoint, I highly push this idea again of understand value creation. We're not just creating features to create features, but be able to explain to people the value associated with that. But your question goes to it's interesting in the evolution of ServicePower in that, and I don't know how deep you want me to go in everything that we do, but I'll just tell you at a high level. When you think of field service management, there are a couple different models of how you can execute on that. There's, do I employ a workforce, or do I use independent contractors? And the reality is, I feel like ServicePower kind of pushed into existence the idea that you don't do one or the other. Really, the world has gone to both. I have to know how to manage a workforce of my own employees and supplement that with independent contractors. But again, as part of that evolution, we kind of ran as two separate businesses for the longest time. Like, we were out selling, oh, you have an employed workforce? Here's what you're going to use. And, oh, you have an independent contractor workforce? Here's what you're going to use. And it was in 2017, probably the most transformational time for ServicePower, that we were, before that, publicly traded on the London Stock Exchange. Very difficult in that environment. We had to very much grow organically. We were taken private in 2017 and got heavy investment to the point of sort of the culture of how we develop. We got tasked with, it's time to unify our platform into this idea of, how do I intelligently understand how to work between two different workforces that what we think our competitors don't understand is you work very differently, whether it's employed versus a contractor. And so as we were unifying the platform, our overall goal was, no matter what service event comes in, whether I'm using an employee or a contractor, how do I ensure I give the same world-class experience to that end consumer who's doing that? So again, kind of to your question there, it wasn't about like, what's the best way to develop this? It's whatever it is, how do we ensure we're getting to, we want the experience to be world-class. It doesn't matter which resource you're using. I get a similar experience. I'm defending the brand of our client. That's always the first, that's what matters most from a product standpoint and our platform standpoint. So I hope that's along the lines of how you asked that.
No, I think that's really good. And you brought up a couple, I think, really interesting things to kind of dive into, because I've had a couple experiences that are probably in a similar vein, where you're taking, two disparate either platforms or applications or even experiences, and really trying to unify those. And I'm interested in, what were some of the challenges that you faced? What was kind of the approach that you took as you had kind of this separation and said, we really need to create a unified, cohesive, exceptional experience and bring these things together. What did that look like? Obviously there's a lot of challenges with that, because, there's different approaches that you take in kind of different areas. And how did you overcome those? And what was ultimately the end result of that?
Yep. So I'll tell you the easiest answer to that is, well, first I should explain, when you look at our platform as it exists today, the various modules, the different things we do. So when you think of the fact that we do intelligent dispatch, those claims that I was talking about, the reimbursement to service contractors, we have a customer portal that keeps the consumer involved in full transparency for them, empowers them to self-schedule, all the different things that we do. We have a mobile component. Some of that we built ourselves. Some of that we acquired. We did a pretty good job, and I say that a little sarcastically, we did a pretty good job of having disparate technologies throughout those acquisitions, all of that stuff. So again, knowing the mission of, we've got to unify this in a way that our clients see it as a unified platform and a unified experience. We didn't want to rewrite anything, but we looked at it as, how do we minimize or mitigate anything that we look at from a technology standpoint and say, we might consider that tech stack to be a little more legacy. But again, I don't want to take it on and completely rewrite it, but how do I minimize it? How do I turn it into a service in the background? Because one of the bigger things we did is unification. Is it's very common that a lot of our clients integrate to us, right? And so we first started with, I have to have one single point of integration, one common layer that clients come to integrate, and we will work out then. We call it service broker. That's the way. So we're brokering all these transactions. Our developers would probably get mad if I just characterize it as an ESB, if you're familiar with that term, but that's kind of what it is. But now think of all those modules, the logic behind them in the background. One, I've got clients who have one single point of integration, so I've made it easier on them. I've got one singular UI, so I've unified those UIs across the top. But in the background, there is a lot of work that goes on that says, all right, I've hit a point of integration, and now I have to know which service to talk to get the response I'm looking for. And so that's how we did it. Is we as much as we could, we turned those into services in the background that I can then call on. What that also does is when we are, whether we're innovating, whether a client's got a specific change request, we can build in the background, and then what's the word I'm looking for? We can make that available through the integration or through the UI. And again, it's still a singular view, singular experience for them, where we might be working across a couple different modules to do it. So there's a little work on us to do it, but we have really simplified it for our clients and how it's done.
I think that that's so important. And I love really the key being the user and customer experience, because I think so often it's easy to almost turn that around and be like, what is the easiest way for us to do these things? And maybe, and often that's where we end up with multiple applications or multiple services and just kind of expecting the client or the customer to kind of navigate two or three things. And you can see that you as users of products, we may not understand that, that's how we ended up with some of these disparate experiences, but that's ultimately what it was. It was easier for whoever is creating it to have, multiple things rather than unify it in a simplified experience. Like you were saying, where ultimately it ends up being technically more challenging and harder on the business creating it, but it ends up being a much simpler user experience to just have, one UI that you need to go to and one place to integrate, and then everything else being handled on, the back end with all of the services and the multiple points of integration, where you don't have to see that as the user or the customer. It just works, and you kind of have that delightful experience. I love that.
We were what you're talking about before that, back in the early days was, oh, you're using this component, then you go sign in over here. You're using that component, you go over there. And then we did some, well, you're in this, but you want to look at that. So we've given you a link to click that takes you over there and signs you in. But even that's different than I sign in, I have one singular UI. We even mapped out all the various personas of that to say, okay, who are the types of users? And then just plan out okay, how do I communicate with the services in the background to visualize to that user?
Yeah. And that's a lot of hard work. I know I've been through it several times, and doing that unification, it can be a real challenge in order to bring the experience together like that. But ultimately for the end user, it becomes so much simpler and so much more intuitive to be able to, like you said, to not be linked from one place to the other. You go in and you sign in, and then you have to link over to another place and in order to get to whatever that you need. I think I just absolutely love that, because it speaks to, I think, the problems that so many of us face especially as we're handling applications or software that has been around for a little bit longer, which eventually is all software. We think that, maybe we're building something new and flashy, but after a short period of time, it has been around for a little while, and you start to face these problems no matter what. It's just the nature of software. You have to continually be thinking about it and cognizant of the user experience, because otherwise it starts to pull apart into, these multiple experiences, kind of like we were talking about.
Right. I mean, the one thing I'll tell you that sometimes is a little bit of a controversial opinion, not that big a deal, but you get asked all the time, well, when is that going to be done? When is on that product? when is that product done and you can just harvest off of it, right? And the reality is, the answer to that, in my opinion, is it's never done, ever. I mean, even the unification that we've done, there's always still ongoing work that we're doing to try and improve it. Because, I mean, I know it sounds cliche, but if you're not constantly improving, then you're falling back, right? Or you're getting stale. So it's never done. And we do get asked that all the time. Well, when is this one done? And we can just like that, I can go into, I've heard this term before. We can just go into maintenance mode on it. And it's like, there's no such thing. It doesn't exist. So.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
Yep.
I have never liked that idea of just it's maintenance mode. And I remember in a previous role, the organization talking about like de-staffing down to just a maintenance team at some point for some of the products, where it goes down to just like a developer or something like that, just to maintain it. And at that point, it's like this thing ultimately will never be the same, because a product is never at the point where it works so beautifully and so flawlessly that you can just have somebody there maintaining it, whatever that's supposed to mean. Because like you said, if you're not constantly improving it, you will ultimately be falling behind, because there are other things that will constantly be improving, and the experience will constantly be degrading. Right. Over time. And if you're not working on it, then it is just by its very nature getting worse over time.
Yep, exactly.
I'm interested, you mentioned bringing a lot of these things together, buying some of the software, reusing some of the things you had built in-house. How did you approach that? We've done this, multiple times, throughout some of the applications and software that I built, as we've been building in-house and bringing in other things from external vendors and kind of tying it all together. What has been your approach to kind of this buy versus build in kind of putting together the experience?
So for me, I am always of the mindset, I get asked all the time, what would it take to build something, or can we build something? And, I'm always of the mindset is you can build anything, right? Yeah. Technical standpoint, we can do anything. So it's more about speed to market. Can I find it somewhere that I can bolt it on and I can be in the market faster? That to me is always the number one consideration. Now, when we evaluate things, when it becomes a buy, we are looking at how extensible is it, how well is it, can it bolt in and talk to other applications? But I think that's always the mindset of we can always build. I can't tell you how many times I get asked, is this even possible? Pretty much anything's possible. When you talk about software, but it's always a speed to market question for us. And so we just evaluate it based on that, I think, is the highest level of how that decision's made.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. As you've kind of grown through, we've talked a little bit about this, grown through ServicePower and come up through the organization. I'm interested in, how you've viewed your, the role changes. And one of the things that we see a lot now is, kind of this moving from company to company, which I think is probably more common now. What's your mindset as far as staying with ServiceNow or ServicePower, not ServiceNow, which is also software company, ServicePower for 28 years, kind of moving up through the organization, taking on multiple different roles, as opposed to, taking on new roles at different companies. Walk us through, your mindset as you were going through that, and possibly even considering, the pros and cons of that. And especially as today, it's probably more of a common mindset to move from company to company.
Yeah, I totally recognize I'm an anomaly in the world. Stays at a company as long as I do. Even I'm a bit of an anomaly within ServicePower. We do have a lot of people though who have stayed a long time. I don't even think I'm the longest tenured right now. I think we've got a couple people that started a little bit before me. So that's the number one thing is ServicePower is a great place to work. But to be very honest with you, 28 years being a long time, it's not like I haven't had my opportunities, right? That said, because of the opportunities I've had within ServicePower, and to be able to run other sections of the business. I am a guy who, if I just had the same job for 28 years, that would probably be a little soul crushing. And I get, I have to feel like I'm advancing and taking on new challenges, and ServicePower has afforded that to me at every turn. So, just to give you an example, I ran product for my first go round. I did it for about 5 years. And at that time, that was after I'd run development, and that was kind of building out product from the ground up. When I first took on the title of, I think my title was VP of Product Management, I was it. I was product, one guy. And now we have 6 product managers. I have a program manager within product. We have documentation people within product. So we have built that out over the years. So really proud of that. That's where at a certain point it was like, all right, I've been doing this for 5 years. What's next? Where are we going next? And there was this thinking that our consulting arm, one, I did kind of know our platform inside and out. So how could I look at things from that perspective and go, how can I take what I know about the platform and build up professional services in a way that they become more efficient and we can implement better and just, become more powerful and more valuable as it relates to the services we can offer to our clients beyond just what we're building in the platform. So that was exciting. When some issues happened with who took my place in product, and that I think I ran professional services for 3 years. It even became clear to me. I'm like, this is great that I've done this. It's on my resume. I started talking to people going, I'm seeing some issues and things, or my opinion of how we're doing things on the product. And everyone kind of agreed. And they're like, well, what do you think we should do? And I said, I'm ready to come back. Would you afford me that privilege? And they were all like, yeah, happy to do that. Whatever you want to do. I think the number one answer to that is I feel like my fingerprints are all over this company at this point. And there will, I'm 53 now. I don't think I think change will happen in my future, but there is some line or level, and I don't even know if I know it yet, that I want to get ServicePower to before I just say, you guys are great and you don't need me to do this anymore. And it is nice to wake up every day, and I know I feel very valued at ServicePower. So yeah, for me, it's just, I haven't wanted to, every time I've thought about had opportunities that presented themselves, and it's like, I like being here. My roles change enough that the challenge is still there. So
I think that's really great. And I think a lot about that sort of thing, especially within a career of both the opportunity to move in around to different companies and find those different roles, but also finding them within a company, kind of like you were talking about, and being able to both grow and develop there, which is another way of doing it, kind of like you mentioned, like not necessarily having to move into other places in order to find those types of opportunities, which I think is often kind of what happens is, not necessarily being able to find those moves at a company. And so having to kind of look outward in order to do that. And so being able to find that. And then this idea of finding that, I've heard the reference to like a terminal seat. So not necessarily that all of us are going to find a place that we're just going to stay forever, but finding that place that is like, kind of like you mentioned, that you don't have that desire to leave. Like, this is a place that I could stay for a long time because you feel valued and you have the opportunities to grow, and you have an exciting challenge or challenges that you're continually taking on, which ultimately is a lot of what we're working for anyway, right? So I think that those are interesting things to think about, at least from my perspective, especially as we're considering career moves and career progression. I think that it's valuable to kind of take all of that in context, especially as we're trying to kind of shape careers. And it's interesting because I think the mindset has shifted being a long-term at one place into kind of moving around to lots of places. And it'll be interesting how that continues to shape and shift over the next little while, because it's constantly shifting and generating, and I don't know where it will land.
Yeah. And I'll just say, I don't, again, I recognize I'm different in that it's 28 years, but what I would tell people is there is something about what it does to your resume if you can show, and like this is common in the software world, so I'm not necessarily talking specifically about ServicePower here, but if you can show that you can build an organization, build a platform, and in a lot of cases in the software world, there may be an exit that happens, whatever. If you can be part of that end to end, and that doesn't have to be, again, that doesn't have to be anywhere near 28 years, right? Some people are doing 3 to 5 years, right? Potentially even less. But if you can do that, I mean, there is a formula to that if you can show that you've done that beginning to end, that's going to be a very powerful tool where you're going to get to kind of pick and choose. I mean, we have those discussions with our ownership at times where obviously they hold a lot of different companies and they talk about best practices across the different companies of processes and mechanisms that they're doing to manage things. And so there's a science to it. And again, if you can show that, I participated in that beginning to end, it's just a very powerful tool that now tons of opportunities will open to you.
Absolutely. I think that's great. One of the big things that we're talking a lot about today is AI and its growing role in the services and the products that we're using. It's growing in pretty much, you can't really get on to anything right now without kind of seeing the discussion of AI. And I know in most of the things that I'm doing now, it's kind of like, where are we incorporating this? How can we continue to develop it? So I'm interested, how are you incorporating AI? How do you see it impacting, the customer service experience, the products that you're doing, and just the future of, customer service and experiences in general?
Yep. So I'm going to throw in one other term for you that I think is synonymous with AI and everybody says they're doing it. They're using AI and machine learning, right? So you all see AI. I'll tell you specifically about from a ServicePower standpoint, like for us, it's all about the ability to predict. So using AI and machine learning for things like I have a service event and can I use predictive triage based on what I'm hearing are the issues to suggest to try this, try that. Once I've identified there's an event of service going on, can I predict what parts I might need on my truck? And can I make predictions that say, well, if I'm using this one part, I'm just as likely to need another part? Because the whole idea in our world is I want somebody showing up with everything they need, first time fix, and I'm done. So I don't want to have to order a part. I don't want to have to say I'm going to have to come back. That's a big part of in my world today where AI and machine learning are playing a role. We also, for a long time, actually have used AI-based algorithms as it relates to when you have an employed workforce, and I can do things like how do I optimize their schedule. So there's a lot of things that we can shift levers on a business based on their KPIs, and again use AI to as jobs are running to understand how are people performing. So how does that affect how I should create schedules in the future? So we're very, very much historically we've been involved on the AI side. What I'll tell you as it relates to the combo of that AI and machine learning, what I feel like we've learned as we've been working to build these things out or partner with people who bring AI and machine learning is everybody says they do it. Doesn't mean they really do. And what I've learned to ask people when it relates especially to something like machine learning, the real trick behind it is you have to build the model to begin with. And to build the model to begin with, you have to be able to work with unstructured data. So someone has to create a way to capture unstructured data. And then in interpreting that unstructured data, and it starts to make suggestions, you then have to have a feedback loop because that's how it learns. And so, again, when I start pressing people, like if we're looking at partners that say, I have this great machine learning tool, I go, well, tell me how you're structuring unstructured data. That's number one. And then I will say, explain in some level of detail how your feedback loop works. Because what you start to learn is, well, what they're really doing is they're using historical data to make predictions based on just history, but it doesn't have this continuous feedback loop because the key to it is it's supposed to learn over time and shift and make the predictions as it's understanding more data. And so that's where I find all the discussion around AI and ML to be fascinating because there are a lot of real world applications of it going on today, but I still feel like it's in this state where people say they do it and they might be on the path, but again, there's a lot still going on that they need to do to have it properly done. and useful, bringing value. So
yeah, it definitely feels like we're in this almost infancy stage of it. Well, and we've been there for a little while, but on the cusp of what's going to be just a new phase of this, where AI has lived in PowerPoint for a long time, which we say that a little bit tongue in cheek, but where everybody has been talking about it and doing some pretend or some approximation of it. But as we really start to be able to get into it more, I think there's more and more, like you said, coming of age of real applications of it that we're really starting to see, which will be really interesting, and how they impact software and how that starts to spread into other real world applications, which we'll probably start to see more and more of, which is both exciting and it will probably be really fascinating over the next little while.
I think the number one thing that I see out there today that's fascinating to me is ChatGPT and what people are starting to be able to do with that. There are so many different applications to how that can be used. We're even looking at it today as part of how it can help quality of code. And it can spot and check and say, you need to look at this and that and that. And I mean, that one's one that totally fascinates me right now.
Yeah, no, it's the applications of it, I feel like have just grown incredibly fast, and are just continuing to spread really, really quickly. So it'll be really interesting. I'm interested, we've kind of touched on a few things about your career, but I'm interested in, as you kind of look back, what you wish you would have known earlier in your career that maybe you know now.
I mean, I know specific answers to that as it relates to ServicePower, just general career. I mean, you look back, and hindsight's always like, if we had thought of this idea, 5 years ago, we could have been so much further out ahead of the world. I'm trying to think. Again, I'll give one example of that, and then maybe that'll trigger just a more generic response. Is when we were kind of running separately, one of the things traditionally for the longest time that ServicePower didn't have, we work with the largest of the large companies. When you look at our client list, so if you consider let's just take it as an example, appliance manufacturers, GE, LG, you mentioned Whirlpool already, Electrolux, the largest of the large, and we have almost all of them on our platform already. We had this sort of strategy of they all come with their own front-end CRM, so they're going to do work order management and that. They're using us for services in the background, and that's great. And for the longest time, that's how things ran. But I remember people actually saying, yeah, we're not a front-end system. We leave that with the client. And over time, clients started saying to us, hey, I don't want to use Salesforce for my front end. It's just like, I have to get this nuclear bomb of a system. Don't you have something simple that you can give us? And that was something, so maybe I can turn this into a generic answer, is everything doesn't have to be complicated. You don't always have to build these huge complex systems that do so much. You'd be amazed at how much people value simplicity. And so based on that, we started this, I think, 1.5 years ago. We have actually built out, finally, our own front-end work order management system, and it's getting great reviews and people are interested. And again, it's when people ask us, well, is it a CRM? And we go, no, it's not. It's specific to field service. It's specific to book and manage jobs, from end to end of the process, and have that front end to give you full visibility and, all the alerts you need and everything that's going on. And again, they look at it and they go, well, actually, this is really valuable because it's simple. I don't need 1 million functions. And it's kind of just like a light bulb way back in the day of, we were actually openly saying, well, that's not who we are as a company. And we're not going to build that. And again, when you hear, well, I just want something simple, And so that would have been a good one to think about early on, because you're always thinking in these big grand terms, and you don't always need that.
Yeah, that's really good, because Salesforce, for example, is just so complicated. A lot of the best solutions are just very, very simple. I mean, obviously it's a super powerful thing. And a lot of times some companies and some groups need very, very powerful solutions. But a lot of times the right answer is a very, very simple solution where you don't need every possible option or every possible feature or anything like that. You just need a very specific, simple solution. And I think that's absolutely right.
Well, there's another saying I've always heard that I think kind of applies to that is when you have someone, and Salesforce is a very powerful tool, just like you said. So I'm not trying to be negative on this goes to a lot of different companies we've seen. You build so much across the top from a functionality standpoint. And so they make the comment that, the solution is a mile wide, but it's only an inch deep, because then you get into what if each of those do? Well, there's so many for them to manage that they have a little bit of functionality. Whereas that's another interesting one is we've learned stay in our lane, stay at what we're good at, stay at what our core competency is, and make that powerful, right? And you can still say, make that simplistic to use, easy to use, but double down on what you're good at, right? Instead of, we constantly get asked, are you going to build out these additional 10 things? And they're not just features, they're like full-fledged modules. And sometimes we just flat out say, it's not who we are. Happy to partner with someone or bolt on something that you may want to use, but again, double down on what you're good at.
Yeah, I think you've hit on a great point there, and pass or say no to the things that just don't fit within that.
Right.
And you know, stick with what makes sense for you.
Yep.
And you don't have to say yes to everything.
Exactly. Oh, that's another one is go back to that culture question you asked me, say yes to everything. Again, in 28 years, I've seen us go through periods where you got to make a deal, you say yes to everything. We got to keep the doors open. There were years where it was like, got to keep the doors open. But yeah, the problems that creates from a product standpoint are, eventually you got to overcome that stuff where, well, now I'm on the hook to build out all this stuff that can I productize and can I sell it to the rest of the world? Is it only going to be for this one deal now? Or, and that makes it tougher to support, tougher to scale. It's all stuff you have to consider.
I have definitely been there. And I think probably most people listening have probably been there as well, where you say yes to far, far too many things, especially when it comes to making some of those deals or sales or whatever it is. And that's just, it ends up being a terrible, terrible spot to be in too often.
Right.
This, Brad, this has been a really, really fun conversation. I do have two kind of wrap up questions that we like to do here at the end. But before we get there, is there anything else that, you would like to add that we are on any of the things that we talked about, or maybe didn't get a chance to talk about?
I don't know. I'll be honest with you. Again, I told you beforehand, this was my first podcast, and the time flown by. I'm shocked that we've been at this for quite a while already. So I don't know. I guess I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't throw out a pitch for anybody who hears this to go check us out on our website, ServicePower.com. That maybe is coming in your final two questions. We think we have a pretty powerful solution at ServicePower. We think we're very unique. Nobody competes with us on the two streams I've talked about as far as employed versus contracted and how you blend that together. There is no company out there that does it the way we do it. There is a reason we do it the way we do it, because we know that you interact with those different workforces in different ways. So we think we have a pretty powerful solution. So, if anyone's listening that has not heard of us or wants to take a look at that, check it out. I would just encourage people, when they do check it out, just go look at our client list alone. Our client list is pretty amazing for when you consider who we are as a company and the size we are. We have blue chip clients. Just like I said, the largest of the large. I would just encourage people to check that out.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we'll put that link in the show notes to servicepower.com. Anywhere else where people can find out more about ServicePower or you or anything else?
The website. If they want to reach out and find me on LinkedIn, you're going to find plenty of marketing material we've put out there. An article's usually going out, or some thought leadership, so I would check us out definitely on LinkedIn as well. And again, feel free to search up my profile. A lot of the content we're putting out is a combination of, it's under my name, it's under ServicePower in general, but that would be another easy place to find us. And again, it's because I'm just going to assume your podcast is huge. That's North America and Europe. That's basically where we play. So yeah, global.
Yeah, we'll put the links to all that in the show notes.
Okay.
So you can check that out.
Awesome.
And then for our wrap up questions, we like to ask if there's anything that you have read or watched or listened to recently that you found particularly interesting.
this should probably be product related, right? Or is this just anything?
This is just anything. So anything that you've watched or read or listened to, you can we kind of leave this one wide open.
I mean, again, it has nothing to do with product. I'm trying to think what all we've been reading or doing as it relates to product, but just life in general. Again, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I read things that are related to relationships and how to interact with people. And part of that from a business standpoint is I'm a big believer of culture mattering in business. But even beyond that, as a guy who, again, I already mentioned here that I'm 53 years old. I'm there was a point in life where I had to kind of restart life a little bit. And that's what got me out here to Arizona. And so I do a lot of reading as it relates to how to be better with people, how to be better in your relationships. And so I think, again, just the one thing that's coming to mind for me, and it's not a book, it's literally just a quote, and I won't even get the quote 100% accurate, but it was something along the lines of the expectations that people have about everything whether it's work, whether it's family, relationships, whatever they're doing. And it's understanding in life that, life is this journey where the reality is, again, I'm going to try to do the quote, but I won't get it nearly right. The quote was something along the lines of, life is like a journey on a train. It's going to be hot. You're going to see that it's dusty. There's jolts. There's, and in life in general, you don't make most putts. Most meat is tough. It's understanding when you have those certain moments in life, like when you're on the train and you suddenly see these beautiful vistas, you arrive at this beautiful destination. Life is recognizing when you're in these incredible moments. They're not all going to be incredible. So have the perspective that, be grateful for everything you have. And again, just recognize that it's not always, it's going to be a grind most of the time. So just be thankful that you're on the journey, right? Again, I really botched it. I know who did the quote. I just don't have it 100%. If you want, I could look it up real quick. I know exactly how to find it, if that'd be helpful. But
that's a good, I'm sure that's a great paraphrase of it. And I like the essence of it, because it's very much, we're not, certainly not every moment is a great one. And, there's a lot of just the kind of, like you said, the bumps and jolts and dustiness, but then appreciating those special moments as well. And actually really taking the time and being in them, I think is a great part of it. So I love that. I think that's great.
Right. Let's see. Here it is. Anyone who imagines that bliss is normal is going to waste a lot of time running around shouting that he's been robbed. The fact is, most putts don't drop. Most beef is tough. Most children grow up to be just people. Most successful marriages require a high degree of mutual toleration. Most jobs are more often dull than otherwise. Life is like an old-time rail journey. Delays, sidetracks, smoke, dust, cinders, and jolts, interspersed only occasionally by beautiful vistas and thrilling bursts of speed. The trick is to be thankful for letting you have the ride. I love that quote. I think it's spectacular. Yeah.
Well, I think that's probably a great place to end it as well. So take time to especially enjoy those amazing vistas that we get along the way. Well, Brad, this has been a really great conversation, and I appreciate it. We will again put all of those links in the show notes, and appreciate all of the insight that you've had with both the life quotes as well as the product experience. And just a lot of the business and customer experience and customer insights. I think this has been a really, really great conversation.
I appreciate you having me. I had a blast. I love doing this kind of stuff. Although, again, this was my first podcast, but thank you for having me. Yeah, this was great.
All right. Well, Brad, appreciate it. And thank you everyone for listening. We will see you again next time. Thanks again for listening. If you like the show, be sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can follow the show on Twitter at prod_by_design. That's prod_by_design. You can follow me at Kyle Larry Evans on Twitter as well. If you want more product conversation, check out my newsletter, Product Thinking, at productthinking.cc. You can follow me on Medium at Kyle Larry Evans as well,
or check out my Medium publication, Product by Design. Thanks again.